Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for Zooming in today. I appreciate your attendance. I am a principal and managing director at Hub Investment Services, a division of Hub International. And on behalf of all my colleagues at Hub, I'd like to thank you for joining again and say that we appreciate our partnership with the Press Herald and their leadership in presenting things like Business Unusual and continuing the community conversation on business and important matters in Southern Maine and the state across our great state of Maine. As we do this today, I hope you keep in mind that the folks at Hub are always available to you to help navigate in these uncertain times. This really isn't about us, but it's about trying to keep our community together and have our business community moving in the right direction. And whether you need help in the employee benefit space or property and casualty risk management or retirement plans, we're in a position to try to help you get through these uncertain times and get to the other side and hopefully come out of this in the near future in a positive direction. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Andrea, for the rest of the conversation. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Goodkin, and I work with Peter at Hub International, and I'm the practice leader for our human resources consulting practice. And 1 year ago, we were hosting all kinds of webinars and educational programs around how to manage the crisis brought about by the pandemic. And there were all kinds of predictions about what was going to happen. And even at that time, we were talking about the workforce of the future, what it would be like, what it would mean, and how it would be reimagined. Well, that reimagined workforce of the future is here now. And we're getting back to business, and that involves a lot of things. Figuring out how and where work gets done. What does flexibility mean anyway? How have employee preferences changed? And what do we need to be thinking about for our return to physical offices? What about culture, recruiting, rewards, and retention? And these are all things that we'll contemplate today. And as we dig in, I do want to acknowledge that there's a broad range of businesses and industries participating today, and we will do our absolute best to address these matters in a way that's meaningful across the board, so bear with us on that. So to kick it off, I'm going to actually turn it over to each of the panel members to introduce themselves. Be sure to take yourself off mute. And I'm going to start with handing it over to Lisa Whited.
Thanks, Andrea. I'm Lisa Whited, and here in Portland, Maine, I'm the founder and chief transformation officer of Workplace Transformation Facilitation. And I'm also a senior associate with AWA, Advanced Workplace Associates, which is a global workplace strategy and change consultancy located in the UK. My work focuses on helping organizations make good decisions around the workplace and using it as a way to engage employees in the change process to build community and engagement, and also use it as a way to make better decisions for the planet. I'm delighted to be here.
Great, thank you, Lisa. And I will hand it over to Tony Payne. Tony, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure do. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. And thanks to Hub for working with the Press Herald to make this possible. There are tons of questions ahead. So just in terms of background, I'm here representing MEMIC, which is the state's largest workers' compensation insurance company. We have about 118,000 employers that we insure, which means we're covering about 200,000 workers. So all of them, I'm sure, are going to have questions regarding the topics today. I look forward to the questions coming in, and we'll do our best to talk, particularly from MEMIC's perspective, around safety. Whatever we do, we need to do it safely.
Thank you, Tony. And Lisa DeSisto.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lisa DeSisto. I'm the CEO of Masthead Maine, which is made up of 3 media companies. You know the Press Herald brand. I hope all of you do. And we also have the Kennebec Journal, the Morning Sentinel. We also oversee the Lewiston Sun Journal and a number of weekly papers, the Forecasters, which I know you love. And we have about 450 employees in many locations around the state. And I hope I can add some insight today, because I think we're an interesting employer and that we're also a manufacturer. So, because we produce the papers every day. So we've had some different challenges as well. So thank you for having me. I'm not really used to answering the questions. I'm used to asking them. So let's see how I do.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. And I'll just circle around since I was muted at the beginning on myself, and just say again that I work with Peter Fendler at Hub International. I'm the practice leader for our human resources consulting services practice. I've spent my career working in human resources and HR technology, both in-house and as a consultant. And again, I'm really excited to be your moderator today. So to kick things off, we're actually going to start with a poll question. And there we go. So as we get back to business, if you want to take a second, what are your greatest concerns about getting back to business? We'd love if you want to just take a moment and indicate your response to this quick poll question.
I just found out I can't vote. Apparently panelists can't vote. Bummer.
There we go. So let's see, it looks like deciding how much remote work makes sense in the future is our most popular response here, followed pretty closely by employee expectations of flexibility, office space protocols, and cultural ramifications. So all very important elements when we talk about getting back to work. So I'm going to kick things off and start with our first question out to the panel. This one goes out to Lisa Whited. Lisa, how has the pandemic shifted, in your opinion, what companies prioritize for their employees? Things like how and where work gets done. Where does flexibility even fit in there?
It certainly has put so much focus on health and well-being. It's interesting, we were just chatting about that before starting this discussion. But we've known for years that health and well-being needs to be paid attention to for people, and certainly the pandemic has blown that wide open with views into stress and managing home and family. It's always been there, but it was more hidden before, right? When people were coming into the office. So it's been a moment for organizations to really reflect and say what really matters, what are ways that we can work smarter and work better, what are the good things we can take from the pandemic that allow us to still be productive and efficient, but also allow our people to feel better and be better. We know from data and research that when people have better well-being and health and more balance in their lives, they're more productive, they're more engaged. When they have choice about work, then we know choice also leads to higher engagement. And when I talk about choice and flexibility, we're talking two spectrums. We're talking choice in where, in location, and choice in when, in time. So it's looking at both of those aspects. Those are things that organizations really, I think, are focusing on right now.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to take that and hand it over to Tony. And Tony, let's take that from the perspective of the worker. What has changed for employees and their preferences? Things around, structure versus flexibility, office space versus ability to work from home, or some sort of hybrid. You can talk about it a little bit from that employee perspective.
Sure. Actually, we at MEMIC have done a couple of polls of our own coworkers, our teammates, to find out what their interests and preferences are. And we pretty well mirror what we think is the national scene, which is that about 15% of the workforce really wants to go back in the office. They want to be social, they work better, they feel more productive. But upwards of about 70% would like to have either the flexibility of a hybrid model or just to remain working from home. And the big factors, as you can imagine, is first and foremost, commute time. They have just, through this entire period, they've regained, anywhere from an hour to 2 hours of time that they can be outdoors, they can do time with family, they can do all the things that Lisa talked about, inclusive of when they do it. So that's a really big part of the equation, I think. The other is they're saving money. A lot of them have to pay for their parking costs or some part of it, and gas. So there's a whole variety of change that has occurred. But, you know, if I were to run just a quick bullet of other changes, we've got, as I said, 24/7 work access. Change in supervision, the relationships that they have with their managers is different because it's in the virtual environment. Some have had a change in duties in order to be flexible and responsive to these new circumstances. They have global opportunities. You know, one of the things that's concerning is around retention, is that upwards of 25% of the workforce, according to a recent national poll, said, I may be looking for work. I may not be where I've been. From our perspective, we're really worried about safety, and that ergonomics is first and foremost for most people who have the ability to work remotely. So those are just some of the things that I think all of our folks are experiencing for those who are fortunate enough to be working. I just, you know, a big heartfelt wish to everyone who lost their employment and with any hope will be right back in the workforce as soon as it's safe.
Definitely. Thank you, Tony. Lisa, before we move on, anything that you want to add or throw in there to what Tony was just talking about?
I would like to say that both of our dogs are going completely crazy right now. I've texted my husband and my son, who's in the basement playing Xbox right now, and it's full out madness. Can anyone relate to that? I have no idea what the answer to Tony's question was, so I'm going to pass to Lisa.
Oh my
I was
God.
talking about you, Lisa.
I love it.
Keeping it real right there.
Oh my
Lisa
God.
Whited, anything you'd like to add there?
Just adding on to what Tony said, that's exactly what we're seeing in all of the data coming back. People love not commuting. They love the time back in their day. And you know, it's funny, we think in Maine that, oh, people don't have much of a commute compared to big cities. That's not true. In our rural state, we have people that are driving very long distances to come into work. So they definitely are recognizing the value of that time back. And of course, that is only better for the environment as far as air quality. So.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Lisa. All right, this next question, Lisa DeSisto, you got your dogs under control? Because I got a question coming out to you right now.
I'm sorry, everything's under control.
Perfect. It would be okay if it weren't, but I just wanted to check.
Right.
So Lisa Whited was just talking about, you know, how the company, you know, prioritization for employees, and Tony talked about it from the perspective of the worker. Lisa, when you think about these factors relative to, you know, evaluating, you know, the business of the future, what does that look like? How can you, you know, add that when you're looking, like I said, when we're talking from the business perspective?
Yeah, I think what's hard for us is because we have such a range of employees, from press operators to people that work in our distribution facilities, then to reporters and salespeople, that we don't have a one size fits all. Like, some people have to be at the facility, especially the folks that work on the manufacturing side. But from the other folks on the business side, we think that this flexibility is going to be part of recruitment and retention. I find myself guilty of this, that I just really would think about employees like when they would be in the office, but this whole experience has opened us up to think about people and their whole life and what's going on at home, and how we can be supportive of that, and how we can give them the flexibility that they need. And I think it leads to better engagement, more productivity. So it's really part of what I view as the total rewards package, not just your compensation and your benefits, but what is your work environment like, both home and at the office.
Yeah, great, wonderful. Tony, I have a question that I'd like to put out to you, your direction. For those businesses with employees that are coming back into the workplace, what are the things that they need to consider, whether it's around vaccines, building safety, space, information technology? Help us with that.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, and I cannot underscore this enough, follow the guidance of the CDC. They have been very judicious in their protocols and recommendations. And as we have seen with these very slow loosening up of travel and where people are allowed to go and when they're to go has been very encouraging. But to me, the real trick about reentry is how do you do it safely? And first and foremost, we have to make sure that we continue to do exactly what we've been doing. Wear a mask, keep your distance, and sanitize. Those are the three mantras that we need to stick to until we get the all clear. And I think for a lot of employers, that's what they've been doing anyway. But even ourselves, I mean, I feel so much more comfortable going out in public now that I have my vaccine. And I'm going to have to be doubly judicious about making sure that I'm doing exactly as I've been doing, despite this new freedom. The other thing that, and that brings to mind the entire question of vaccination. How do we deal with that? And vaccination, we cannot underscore enough the importance of people getting vaccinated, because if you'll grant me just a little analogy here, as I think about herd immunity, which is really what we're trying to achieve, is that we're all little petri dishes. And when that bug gets into our system, we're just manufacturing more and more germs. And if you're vaccinated, those germs don't have any place to go. So that's the reason that we need to have everyone vaccinated, so that there's no happy host out there manufacturing germs.
Tony, I think this is a great time. We actually have a question here. If an employer doesn't require vaccinations and an employee who is not vaccinated becomes ill, does that employer have liability there?
It's funny. It'll probably be decided in court one day. We don't really have a lot of law around that. There may be allegations of liability, but ultimately, in the world of workers' comp, at least, if someone's illness was a direct outcome of their employment because of unusual exposure, like the healthcare industry, nursing homes, et cetera, as we at MEMIC do and all workers' comp companies do, we take a very hard look to see where it is most likely that they became infected. And if it was at work, that will be compensable. And therefore, the employer, through the insurance company, accepts the liability.
Thank you for that. Lisa, any thoughts around, returning to the workplace? Any thoughts or comments on what Tony's just shared?
Sure. I can tell you from our perspective. So we have many different locations across the state. In South Portland, which is our manufacturing facility, we are taking a very slow approach. And in fact, that office is closed except to essential personnel. So for us, and then in the other offices where we don't manufacture, we're going back on a voluntary basis. We don't want to send anyone back until they feel comfortable being there. So we have different approaches, and it's allowing us to kind of test and learn, but we really have to keep as few people as possible in South Portland, just so we have that ability to continue to print the papers every day.
Right. Thank you.
Now, I think we seem a little glitchy. Is it me or is it everyone else?
I'm okay.
I'm not glitchy.
You're not glitchy. So is it me? Was I glitchy?
You did not seem glitchy to us. No.
Oh, okay.
seem...
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Great.
Lisa Whited, anything you'd like to add there?
I will just say that across all organizations, all different industries, and across many different geographies, we are seeing a very slow return. People are ensuring, employers are ensuring that people feel comfortable. It's often volunteer only and very gradual, 10% maybe of the workforce, maybe 25% in June. Others are way further out. My husband works for a large company locally, and they originally were October 1st, now being pushed even further. So they're just being responsive. I'm seeing employers being very responsive to what their employees have for concerns and taking a very gradual approach to a return to work strategy.
But I also do want to say this too, that I feel so fortunate that we're in a position where we've been able to continue to operate, support lots of people at home, but think about all the companies that don't have that luxury. And, I just don't want to lose sight of everyone that's worked and supported us at Hannaford for the past 15 months.
That's true. You know, it's interesting. I was reading a poll that was published through the Korn Ferry investment firm this past week, and they said that of the CEOs that they polled, 72% would be open to having a mandate for return, but very few are actually imposing that mandate or anticipate doing so in the near future. So I think that there's and this is, this is going to be a cultural issue for every organization, is what do you do about creating an environment where you grow, you exchange information, you convene, you advance careers, and all the rest of it. And that may be, in ultimate terms, the reason that people are going to return to their space of their own volition, because they see all the activity.
Great. Wonderful. I'm going to shift, and Lisa DeSisto, I'm going to go back to something that you mentioned a few minutes ago around total rewards. And as you contemplate overall how and where work gets done and the changes the businesses are experiencing, how do you see this influencing overall rewards?
Well, I think it's going to be part of interview and recruitment conversations, and certainly part of our retention strategy. I remember we had a situation, call it 5 years ago, where we had someone in the newsroom was having a baby and asked if she could work from home a couple days a week. And I remember at the time, I'm like, how could we possibly accommodate that? And, now I actually feel guilty about it. Like, 5 years later, thinking about, what, we could have accommodated it, but we didn't know what we know now, and how possible that could have been. So it has just totally opened my eyes to, it's not, well, depending on your job function, it's not essential that you're at your desk at 8:30 in the morning at an office space. We've got to do what is going to support people in their whole life. So it's just going to be part of the conversation to recruit talent. And I think it's something that people are going to use to evaluate what opportunities are right for them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so much of it right now, it's really, one size doesn't fit everyone, and it's meeting employees where they're at today. And, all of those different components around rewards Tony mentioned, development, and just, everything that we look at today in terms of what our organization provides to us from a reward standpoint, and what does that mean, and how has that evolved, and businesses are really needing to look at that. Lisa Whitehead or Tony, anything else you'd like to mention around that or comment there?
There's something I want to mention, because I've been reflecting on this. Some of those on the Zoom meeting here would remember Seymour Papert when he came to Maine in 2000. He was out of MIT, and he was working with then Governor Angus King on laptops in middle schools. And there was so much concern about laptops in middle schools 20 years ago. Legislators thought that the kids would lose them, break them, or sell them for drugs. I can't even imagine what this last year would have been like. And we all know that the technology is there. And so to not be afraid of what that technology can do for us to help us work smarter, work better, more effective, more creative. So I know that we are resilient, adaptable, creative people. And I think that the opportunity that both Tony and Lisa have shared with their organizations is to think differently and be courageous about questioning how we've always done things before, and finding ways to support people that maybe, now when somebody comes to you and says, I know I can do great work for you, but can we accommodate it a little differently, to be open to those conversations. It's a wonderful opportunity, because we know there have been so many things in the work world for years, for decades, around discrimination and harassment and inequality. And this is the moment that we have been given in this tragedy of COVID to think differently, to question embedded assumptions, and to really take a stand to say, no, I'm going to make it a different place for my people, so they can't wait to get here. If here is a physical place, or here is a Zoom screen. So I get excited about the possibilities.
It's funny. One of my favorite bromides out of this, it came as a realization. I think we were probably in about a month back in April. And the bromide being that work is not a place, it's an activity for a chunk of the workforce. And when you get your head wrapped around that, then you say to yourself, so what, as a manager, perhaps, what am I managing? And this is another head wrapper is that we really need to manage to outcomes as opposed to activity. And that has a different flavor to it as well. But one of the things that I've been so impressed with our folks at MEMIC and most every company is that they didn't break stride. If us as employers had said, we're going to go to this, maybe work from home model, it would have taken 9 months to put that in place with the technology, et cetera. All happened in 48 hours. People were completely mobile and were delivering a high quality product or service that was high on customer satisfaction as well. So we really are a resilient populace. But I think that as we go forward, we really do need to really address those items is where does work occur and are we managing the outcomes?
That's great, Tony. And this is a good spot. I'm going to call out a question that came in the chat box from my colleague Mim. Would the panel comment on employment in Maine now that we can see it's reasonably possible to work for companies outside of Maine and conversely recruit from other locales? Who'd like to take that?
I've said this for years. I said it to Ed McKersey, who established Live and Work Maine. Wyoming had a slogan that said, live here, work anywhere. And clearly that is such a fitting slogan for Maine. And for years, there's been an effort to look at remote work from out-of-state organizations, people that we know are living here. They have been for a long time, and yet they're working for companies elsewhere. I don't know all the legal ins and outs, tax implications, none of that, but I do think that's an interesting opportunity.
Yeah, we've had the same experience. In fact, one of our vice presidents is in Utah. And we're an East Coast company from Maine to Florida, but there we have an IT VP sitting out in Utah. We've got people scattered all over the country, which again comes back to that poll information that I shared earlier. Is that according to one recent poll, up to 25% of the workforce is considering a job move, which means they're mobile. They've recognized that their talent may be appreciated and compensated differently at some distance. And that's something that we all need to be very mindful of, because retention is probably the most important job that we have before we start replacing workers.
Another question that came in around this that I'm gonna go to, and then we'll move forward. It's been mentioned that the variety of jobs and some positions don't necessarily lend themselves to remote work. And how do we make this equitable and or accommodate employees that feel uncomfortable in the office, that don't necessarily have the ability to work remote? So it is kind of this conundrum. From a business perspective, have we thought about how we'll accommodate that or address that?
Well, I know from our perspective in our printing facility, we worked really hard from a safety perspective to make people feel comfortable. So increased cleaning, mandatory mask wear, social distancing. Sometimes you can't do that when you're hanging a plate on the press. So we worked hard to make sure that the people on site felt as comfortable as possible. Our HR director, Jen Gondek, who's amazing, became like a contact tracing expert overnight. And I feel like she was like never asleep, because she was just like on it, making sure everything felt comfortable. And I think that did give people at our facility some peace of mind that we worked really hard. And I don't want to jinx us and talk about the success we've had, but we have all thought about as we're working from home, as I have my 10-foot commute. You do think about them, and then I of course had this conflict, like, should I go in and thank them? But then I'm a person that is just being introduced to the environment. So I like have these, mental conundrums with myself in terms of how I'm supposed to lead and make them feel valued, but not introduce germs into the environment. So it's very complicated. Did I answer the question?
Well, I don't think there is an answer,
Okay,
quite
good.
frankly, but it's good. That was a great discussion. Lisa?
Andrea, yeah, I would just add that really what Lisa's talking about and what this adds up to is just having conversations, making sure we're taking the time to have real, meaningful, authentic conversations and ask people and invite them into discussions about this, about their safety, how they're feeling, and listen to them. Really, it's empathy, isn't it? I think the biggest muscle we've all built in the last 12 months is empathy. And we need it. God knows the workplace needed it well before COVID. So it's an opportunity. I've got a next door neighbor. He's been my neighbor for about 20 years now. I love him to death. And he's from another country. And I'll never forget when he first came, he just knocked on my door one evening with a bottle of wine. So I'm like, whoa. And it's like, in my country, this is how we connect with people. I'm like, God, come on in. So, I mean, but right, how wonderful is that? So to be open to different ways of connecting and being with each other and building real, deep, meaningful conversations on this water cooler movement, the water cooler moment that people say they're missing, that was such surface stuff. Like, what was that? There aren't even water coolers in offices anymore, so let's just do it differently. Why I can still have a really nice conversation with Lisa or Tony and connect with them and be intentional and go deeper. And that's what we need more of. I think that's what we need more of.
Well, if I can build on what Lisa said, as an example, we have an engagement committee that had actually started before COVID, but they really ramped up and worked on ways across properties to connect people. Everything from hosting a holiday party with trivia online to having a newsletter with recipes in it. And we also have a Masthead Mainers Facebook group where we're learning about each other. What was the first concert you went to? What, show us your pets, whatever they might be. So we're thinking about people and learning more than we ever would have had to. And in fact, people are making more connections across our companies than they would have being in the physical space. We've had quarterly company meetings for everyone. And previously we used to have like 6 sessions. And by the last one, I would be exhausted. And now we just do one. Everyone hears the same questions and the same answers. So just providing that connection, that level of transparency. And also for our return to office efforts, constant surveys about how are you feeling, what's working for you, what's not working for you. So to your point, Lisa, you just have to engage people in conversations, collect information, and really listen.
One of the things as well, and I referenced it before, and I'd love to know both Lisa's experience is around management. What have we learned about managing from afar or via Zoom, and what is it that we're trying to manage in that process? Because I think that for some, the idea is that if you're a frontline or first level manager, your sense of ownership and authority really is proximity. And proximity, of course, has been tossed right out the window under these circumstances. But as we go forward, there will be a hybrid in many organizations. So what happens when you have a department meeting and some people are on the screen and some people are in the room? What does that look like? What's your experience, Lisa's or Andrea?
Yeah, I'll happy to share that one. And I think that I have a client who is CEO who said that she reflects on the workplaces being on-site parenting. She said, that's how we managed. We thought we were there and that was enough. And what we learned, and I've heard many leaders say this, she's not the only one, that what they've recognized is the gap in management skill. They're realizing they were relying on physical proximity and that would equal management. Well, it doesn't. We know it doesn't. So the opportunity again is to pay attention and be intentional on that training. What the gap is the listening and talking and constructive feedback and helpful feedback. These are the things that really need to be paid attention to. We know that there are 6 factors around helping high performance teams work really well. And the 3 of those 6 that need to be paid attention to in a virtual world are social cohesion, trust, and information sharing. And so your example, Tony, of a team meeting, some in a physical place and some on the screen, one of the first things that I would recommend an organization do is put together a working together agreement. And Lisa, we did this with Lisa's team a few years ago. And what that working together agreement does is it allows everybody collectively to come together and think about what would allow them to have great days at work wherever they are and come up with their guidelines of engagement. And nowadays it has to be everything. It has to be whether it's the camera or the audio, how are we going to manage meetings? People have complained about meetings for 30 years, as long as I'm around, you know, professionally, and they hate them. But if people would show up with being prepared, having agendas, keeping things on time, managing the conversation, learning how to facilitate, those are just the types of things that everybody benefits from, whether you're in person in a meeting or on a Zoom call. So there's just so much out there. There's so much great information that would help managers, you know, really take this on. And the one last thing I'll say on the culture piece, as far as the office is a container for culture. And if people aren't there, it is an empty container. Your culture didn't go away. Your culture are your people, your relationships, your conversations. What do you stand for? What is your organizational purpose? That's the culture. That's the part. And we didn't lose that. We're still breathing. So there's so much great opportunity to really pay attention to that. And it just means looking at it in a different way.
Yeah, I think that those are tremendous points, and why we used Lisa to help us make our move from downtown Portland to South Portland, where we moved our staff into the manufacturing facility. What was that, like 5 years ago? At this point, but one of the things, the biggest lessons I learned was the importance of including everyone's voice. So much so that we took the quotes from the survey and we put it up on the wall of how people feel about working there. But for us, it's been easier too, because our mission is delivered every day on your doorstep and online. So for us, you can kind of rally around the news and information that we've been providing to the community. So even though we're not together, we feel more vital than ever. But I'm not suggesting that we're going to be 100% remote all of the time, but I'm so proud of the way that we've operated through this and how wonderful our products continue to be in the journalism that we create.
Hey, Andrea, what about your organization? You're far flung, and
yeah, I was just gonna say, I love this conversation. And what I would add is, one of the things that we know that this pandemic what was created was that decision making was pushed out and down, and these frontline managers who are out there fighting the fight and now largely remote or in a radically changed structure are really having to make those decisions. And one of the things that is extremely important has been and continues to be training for those managers. Our expectations on these managers in the last year, although it was unexpected, but the expectations changed for those managers, and suddenly we have this need for these frontline managers to be out really driving, being the voice of the organization, communicating in a way that we've not needed them to do in the past. And now, as we start to morph into what this future will look like, we still, our expectations on what we need from those frontline managers and supervisors is not going to go back to what it was. It's going to evolve from what it is now. And so we cannot underestimate the training and coaching. It's going to be so much more around coaching to help with those more behavioral type of skills. Gallup has been looking at this for the last year plus. And yes, critical job specific skills are important, but where we're really anticipating that skills gap in the short and longer term future is around those behavioral skills. And Lisa mentioned some of those, communication, accountability, things that are definitely trainable and coachable, but have to be intentional. And so, I really encourage all of us to do right by those managers where we have those high expectations and help them evolve into the place that we're looking for. The other thing that I would just I wanted to comment on just on culture and in the office. I've talked with a lot of businesses over the last year. Something that I've heard several times, and this resonates with my own team, is those work environments that already had a virtual population. So a portion of the workforce just worked virtual. Either they were, around the country or whatever the case may be. Myself, with my own team, I have a large portion of consultants that work around the country virtually. And what I hear over and over again, or have heard over and over again, is that when the main part of the company suddenly went virtual, for the first time, those virtual employees really felt like they were part of the action. They suddenly felt like they were genuinely included, and they actually had a leg up on how to do it. And so it created this very interesting dynamic shift that was really interesting and in a lot of ways, positive. And that when we think about some of those things we want to hold on to after the pandemic, those are some things that I really hope we can hold on to, which is how those fully remote people for the first time really felt like they were part of the organization because everyone else came to where they were. So I don't know if anybody wants to have any thoughts around that.
Well, I have the opposite thought on that, which is for our employees that never left the office, how do they feel about everybody else coming back, right? So are they worried, like, are they vaccinated? Are we going to be safe? I used to get this really great parking spot and now I don't anymore. Now the parking lot's full. So, like, do they kind of like it that it's quiet and, all the extroverts aren't there anymore? So, I don't think we can underestimate sort of the kind of like mental health challenges people are going to experience by moving from being in their house back to an office, which again is why slow is the right pace for it.
No, you're absolutely right about that, Lisa.
Andrea, I was just going to say what you just described is belonging, a sense of belonging. And so it reminds us that everybody, many people haven't felt that, not belonging. And so again, in something as simple as all remote versus not, I just think that's so interesting. The phrase love is love. Work is work. And what can we do to be more inclusive in how we think about work and allowing people to be whole people and show up? And with everything that went on with Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement, everything else is going on. Work has such a huge impact. It impacts my relationship with my husband. If he comes home at the end of the day and is not a very happy person, that's going to impact me. It's going to impact the kids. And if he comes home and is feeling great, or if he maybe got to work from home that day and is feeling great, that has a ripple effect. I don't think we can underestimate the power that work has. And again, I'll keep coming back and saying it, our moment in time to think about it differently, because it does have a ripple effect on so many aspects in our community and in the planet. And when we didn't even touch on climate change, but there's so much there, so much.
Yeah, and Roberta just dropped a meaningful comment in the chat here about all of our pets that are going to go through significant. I've got them too. They're all around us. That everything that influences us and that we influence is evolving and is going to change. So, okay. We have a couple other things I want to do before we really dive into Q&A, and so I want to move things along. We have a second poll question that Strawberry, if you want to bring that in. And so we've already been talking a little bit about culture, but we're going to spend a little more time there. What are you the most concerned about regarding culture change? And I'll let you select an answer there. What are you the most concerned about regarding culture? We'll give it a second. There we go. How culture will be built without day-to-day in-person interactions. The number one here at the bottom, how our culture will help our employees navigate the new business reality. And then just these other two, assessing and measuring culture now and over time, and resiliency. So thank you everyone for dropping your answers in there. So Lisa Whited, I'm gonna send this question out to you. We've been talking about, a lot of decisions and things that are going to impact the workplace. When you think about culture, engagement, and retention, how does all of this tie together in your opinion around those aspects?
So I think it's really important that organizations take a moment to make sure they're clear about what their culture is. And again, it's a chance to revisit, what are our beliefs, culture, again, it's our beliefs, values, traditions, it's our interactions, behaviors, attitudes, it's what the leadership models. So it's that moment to sort of reset or re-emphasize if the culture is feeling good already. But the opportunity is to include employees in this conversation about culture and connection, and to make sure that it is an inclusive process and that they understand what they want to be a part of, how the work that they do every day is impacting that the culture and the purpose and the connection. I've got an organization that I consult with, and it's not MEMIC, although they are one of my clients, but they focus on safety. And I know Tony opened with focusing on safety. And this is a utility company in the Midwest. And their culture is so much around safety that every meeting, no matter what that meeting is about, they start it with a safety tip, anybody in the meeting is invited to share a safety tip. That's how ingrained this is in their culture. They're all about safety. So I think there's an opportunity, again, if they say, well, in our everyday interactions, how do we remind ourselves what our culture is and what's important to us? That's just a simple example that I can think of.
One of the things, Lisa, that you also said, and I just can't amplify enough, is simply being intentional and to draw people into conversations that, if you are on a Zoom meeting, that you're taking every opportunity to speak to the person who's quiet, to make sure their oar is in the water. And that really is no different than if we were all working in the same space together, but it is the sort of thing that then begins to get that sense of belonging and that sense of inclusion, which is essential, I think, to a healthy, high-performing organization. We at MEMIC are in some ways, the pandemic has been fortuitous because we deployed a technology that we had never used before, and we did it within 48 hours. But also, we went through a vision, mission, and values exercise, as well as a strategic plan, all online. And back to your point, is we are at a point in time today, I think, that if we squander it, it's just so easy to fall back into the same old patterns and completely miss this window that we have. And, to me, the fact that at least at MEMIC, we've got a strategic plan in the works is going to keep us, I think, very focused on outcomes, where we're going, and is the activity that we're putting into it the right activity.
Lisa DeSisto, before we jump over to questions, is there anything else that you want to mention around culture, engagement, retention, this culture conversation?
Only quickly, because there are so many good questions to get to. I would just say I echo, first of all, I love listening to Lisa, and she always gives me so many good ideas on things that we should be doing and doing better. But to Tony's point, we have been much more intentional about engagement and hearing people and giving people ways to connect, and that has to continue, especially as we're more dispersed.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to switch over. We have about 10 minutes left. I'd love to dive into some of these questions. We got some great questions in advance, and some have been coming in today. So this one's around training. You discussed the challenge for managers and supervisors to switch up and perform their duties remotely? Is special training needed for effective remote supervision? Are managers and supervisors more inclined to want a return to the traditional workplace? Who'd like to take the training question?
We're just starting to think about it. I feel like we've been in like triage mode for 15 months and haven't been able to focus on that. But now that we know we're not going back in the traditional sense, we absolutely need to provide training for our managers for that. So yeah, it's a really good point. And no, we aren't seeing that our managers are more anxious to come back than the rest of the workforce at all.
Yeah, I agree with Lisa on that. As far as survey results coming back, managers are showing no greater inclination than any other person. You know, it's about 84%, I think, is one of the last surveys I've seen that want to continue to work remotely some of the time. It's in the sweet spots 2 to 3 days a week. That's what I'm seeing coming back.
Yeah.
But, you know, again, the point is, I think that whether it's in this environment or in space shared in the traditional sense, the training really is about inclusion. If we've learned nothing around during this period of time, it's about diversity and inclusion and equity. And equity shows up in all kinds of ways, and that includes being engaged in the work and being invited in.
Great. All right, I have another question here. I've heard we need to upskill our managers to be effective in managing distribution or remote teams. What are some things we need to do or pay attention to? Lisa Whitehead, do you want to start that?
Sure. Again, there's just great research and resources out there, and it has to do with the intentional connection, clarifying goals, making sure people understand what is expected, what needs to be done, what needs to be prioritized. It's really effective team dynamics, paying attention to all. I mean, really, when you look at the workplace, I would say 95% of what's done is done in teams or some semblance of a team. So paying attention to the managing group dynamics and effective team development is something to really pay a lot of attention to. I am a really big believer of vision and clarifying vision and connection to purpose. I don't think that enough of that is done at the organizational level, and then again, making sure it's inclusive all the way through the organization. So it's awesome to go back and revisit that from time to time to make sure people are clear and are focused on what that vision is. But as far as the training, there's so much. I think we can even provide links afterwards to some HR development tools, especially for smaller organizations that might not have HR folks on staff. I know there's a lot of outsourcing that can happen. So I'd be happy to share some links that maybe be helpful to folks.
Great. Thank you, Lisa.
You know, one of the programs in the Greater Portland area is the Institute for Civic Leadership. And a lot of folks have gone through it. And I had a chance a long time ago. But one of the takeaways that I had was to always think in terms of who's not here that should be here. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be in this virtual environment, but that's that management piece that says, am I drawing on that team and the strengths in my team in order to get the best possible outcome and invite differing opinions? Because that likewise tends to improve an organization as long as you're respectful and you're focused on the outcome. But that's, again, the mantra being is who's missing and how to get them to the table.
Tony, don't go away, because I want to ask, I'm going to shift gears a little bit because we've got quite a few questions around vaccinations and return to work. So I'm going to make a mind shift here. So the two questions that I'm going to blend together. Will those not interested in vaccinations be welcome back with open arms? What are the ramifications of asking an employee to get a vaccination? And I'm going to bring two questions together. Should employees visiting customers ask if vaccinations are required before being allowed on the premises? So a whole big wrapped vaccination question, Tony. Have at it.
All right, thanks a lot. Well, the first lesson I think that we're taking away from everything that's been published is as Lisa DeSisto said, let's take it slowly. But secondly is safety is the foundation. We want to make sure that people feel safe and secure, and in fact are to the best of our ability. So we also know, though, at this point, that vaccinations make the difference because of herd immunity, as I described before. So what employers, I believe, should be doing is encouraging and showing their leadership, not only within their own organizations, but with their vendors and their customers. And to basically say, this is an organization where we're encouraging vaccination. Let's stop this pandemic. So that's, to me, that's one aspect. The second, though, and I really think it's a courtesy, is if you're going to be going out to see customers or go into the field or be anywhere else but where you work, the courtesy would be to say, do you have any requirements about coming into your facility? Because it's a check-in. And frankly, I think it's a fairly powerful marketing statement as well. I am here to serve you, but I want to do it on your terms. So those would be a couple of pieces of guidance I'd suggest.
Are there religious exemptions?
There are, and you know, politics and religion, you try a pretty wide path, and people will be able to claim that because it's a protected class. So if that is in fact you know, heartfelt, you have to respect that, but you also may have to change the way that that employee interacts within the organization without facing discrimination charges. And then you talk to your favorite HR person like Andrea, you talk to your attorneys or a professional organization to find out how do you navigate that and what is the common practice to avoid discrimination.
Thank you. Lisa DeSisto, I have a question for you. Maine Today Media has 4 labor unions. Has this presented any unique challenges during this time or looking forward?
Yeah, well, I think what's happened for us is we've actually been able to build deeper relationships, stronger relationships with our labor unions because we really have shared goals around this, and everyone wants to offer flexibility. So we want to, you know, we want to be able to work on that. And then just, you know, from a logistics perspective, we're actually able to, we signed a couple of contracts needed to be renewed, and the negotiation process was so much faster because we didn't have all these scheduling issues because it was so easy to get everyone on a Zoom call. So again, I think, you know, the way that we interact with our labor unions is really similar to what people have talked about here, which is listening, having frequent conversations, getting people's perspectives, giving people a heads up when things are coming along. So I've found it's been really, really productive from that perspective.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Well, this hour flew by. There are about 2 minutes before the top of the hour. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So before I get to my very last question, I just want to say, you know, thank you for everyone for joining today. And thank you, Strawberry, for your facilitation, and Lisa DeSisto, Tony Payne, and Lisa Whited. Thank you so much for everything that you brought today. This was a great discussion. And I have one more question for each of you. And I can't take credit for the creativity of this question. My colleague Mim pulled this forward from the last session, but here's the question. What 2020 pandemic word would you most likely to be rid of going forward? If you could, if there's a word that or a phrase that you could drop from our 2020 vocabulary, what would that be? We'll start with Lisa DeSisto.
Oh gosh. Well, I attended the last session, so I know pivot was really popular, but I think unprecedented. I just feel like, you know, unprecedented or yeah. So I'm going to go with that. Unprecedented times.
Fair enough. Tony.
I want to get rid of the word pandemic from our vocabulary. If I never hear that again, I will be a happy camper.
Great. Lisa Whited.
Mine is hybrid. Mine is hybrid. Work is work. Work is work.
That's great. All
Good
right, well,
point.
I'll pile mine in. I think it has to be silver lining, which I know is 2 words, but and I love silver linings, but I'm tired of talking about them. So thank you so much, everyone.